My name is Sergey Shimko. I'm an architect with Magento Expert Consulting Group. I've been with Magento for over 6 years now. And today, I would like to talk to you about migration to Magento 2. Later on, we'll have a Q&A session with me and Elena Leonova back on stage. All right, when we think about migration process, migration project, you can divide it basically in two pieces. Database migration, which includes migration of your structure and data, tables and records in those tables. That's one piece. And another piece, and this one is closer to my heart as a software developer, it's code migration. Code migration consists of migrating your Magento framework and native modules, third-party extensions that you may have and you probably have in your installation, and then your custom modules and custom themes. That's all included in code-based migration. So what tools do we have to help us in this migration? Luckily for us, Magento developed and released two tools. One is data migration tool, another code migration tool to target these two tasks. These tools are available on GitHub. They're just publicly available. They're kind of separate. They're not part of Magento 2 code base itself. They're separate tools. Here are the links where you can find those. Data migration tool, advanced tool, it targets the whole migration of the database. It's worth the whole different presentations. We're not going to touch this tool today. Feel free to go to GitHub and check it out. What we're going to talk about is a code migration tool. As you can see from the slide, it targets primarily migration of your own custom modules. But then the question is, what happens to these other pieces? So let's take a look at them. Magento framework and native modules. No migration is required. You basically swap these modules underneath the application, just replace them. The only problem is if you have modification of core files, but I hope nobody in the room modified their core files. It's known as an evil thing to do. Ben Marks will come after you if you do it. All right, third-party extensions. So what about those? You would expect vendors of these respective extensions to migrate them. And you just kind of have to check what exactly from the marketplace you use, and you check with respective vendors. And they're already catching up. They're releasing more and more Magento 2 extensions. In the worst case, if you happen to use extension that is not popular and they decide to not support it anymore, it basically falls into the category of custom modules. You may just kind of choose to support it on your own, and then it becomes your custom module that you support only you. Custom themes, as it was mentioned before, theming mechanisms have changed quite a bit in Magento 2. So at the moment, the tool does not cover migration of themes. It's not that it's impossible to cover, but at the moment, it's not really covering. And we see a lot of merchants who use the whole migration project as an opportunity to maybe go responsive and redesign their website anyway, and take advantage of theme inheritance and minimize the amount of code that they have in their theme. Tool migrates modules, but what exactly from modules it's going to migrate? First of all, it's a directory structure of the module. And it's not just directories. It's pretty much all the files in these directories included, especially binary files like images. They will just stay in those directories, and they will go to the proper places according to Magento 2 conventions. Then configuration files. Those are XML files, will be migrated to the format supported in Magento 2. Same with layout files. And my favorite one is PHP code. PHP code probably constitutes the majority of code in your code base, most likely. So that's where the most migration challenge is migration of PHP code. Everything else it may be done kind of manually, but with PHP code, since there is a lot of it, you really may want to use the tool to do it, to help you to do it. All right, so now we know what the tool actually targets. So let's look at the tool itself, what it actually is. It's a command line tool for developers, for Magento developers. I want to highlight it. So as a merchant, you probably, unless you have a background in computer science and Magento, you probably should not be, using the tool. You need to ask your developers to take a look at the tool, and they'll be able, Magento developers with Magento 1 and maybe a little bit Magento 2 expertise will be able to utilize the tool. So what it does, it accepts your code base, Magento 1 code base, does its magic, does transformations, and it generates the code that is compatible with Magento 2 framework. But nothing happens magically like that. There will be manual work required. After running the tool, developer will need to, knowing what the code does, going back to the previous presentation, you need to know what test cases are, how it should behave. You can start verifying if these test cases pass or they don't pass. I think it will be kind of easier to verify because a lot of times it will be either kind of crashing and the fix will be in one line or it will just work. It's not like, taxes, now you have a rounding error in your tax calculation. No, your business logic, if it was correct, it will remain correct. All right, and the tool, just one more point about the architecture of the tool, the way it's built. It's a static code analysis tool. It only analyzes your source code in terms of kind of text files, pretty much, or files and directories in the file system. It's not gonna execute your source code. All right, before running the tool, there is certain preparation that needs to be done. In fact, you have to prepare directories in the file system. So those directories that you see on the screen, I'll display just now, they don't have to be positioned relatively to each other in the file system. They're just directories anywhere in the file system as you wish, but they have to have certain content. First one, obvious, the tool itself. You clone the tool from the GitHub or download as a zip archive. You install the tool. Installation is simple. It's installed with Composer. So you installed the tool in the tool directory. That's good. Now, the first important directory is the source directory. That's the directory where you should put all your custom modules that you want to migrate. You don't put there anything else like Magento core files. Another catch is a lot of people use Modman, different format of packaging modules, which affects the directory structure of the module. So you have to use Magento native directory structure for this module. So it's only these custom modules. Then destination directory. Very simple, it's just empty directory. That's the directory where the tool will be putting its output. Initially, it's empty. Two more directories. Magento 1 directory. It's pretty much a vanilla Magento 1 code base plus all the custom source code, the same code that is in the source directory, all the modules that you want to migrate. Sometimes you may want to migrate kind of modules in isolation from their dependencies. So if this is the case, if you want to migrate a module for whatever reason, I don't know, just to try it, but don't want to migrate its dependencies, the tool still needs to have access to these dependencies, and that's where you put these dependencies in M1 directory. It pretty much contains your full Magento 1 code base. All right, and Magento 2 directory, that's just Magento 2 code base. That's it, nothing tricky there. I want you to memorize these kind of directory names that I used. I'm gonna be using them throughout the presentation to help you guys. That's how you can look at these directories. As an input, the tool accepts source directory, generates output in the destination directory, and it uses directories Magento 1 and Magento 2 just to look things up. Easy to notice that source M1, M2 directories are read-only. Tool is not gonna mess up your source code. It will just read, analyze it, and generate output in the destination directory. So don't be afraid to break any code like this. The tool is intentionally built this way. All right, Now we're ready to actually run the migration, run the tool. I wish I could tell you that it's a one-step process. Just run the tool, it's gonna do everything. But as of right now, the way tool is built, it's actually a set of tools. It's a toolkit, it's not a tool, it's a toolkit that is a set of other sub-tools. And the whole migration process is a 5-step process. Let's just name these steps and we'll go over each of these steps. The very first step, mapping generation. Second step, directory structure migration. Then layout and configuration migration. You can kind of swap them around. They can be run vice versa. And the very last step is PHP code migration. The very first step, mapping generation, is an optional step, and we'll look at it, why it's optional. Directory structure, very important to be run kind of beforehand. All right, let's look into the first step, mapping generation. It's kind of obvious what map means. I would define it, it's just a kind of the key value structure that defines how things have changed. Names of things have changed from Magento 1 to Magento 2. So these are files in the file system that hold this kind of structure to help the tool to know how to rename things, pretty much. It covers module names, it covers class names, it covers view files, it covers table names. And this will be a different maps, different map files in the file system. Out of the box, the tool comes with pre-generated maps. So you don't really have to generate any of those maps. The ones that the tool comes with, they're good to go, except for the case when you really want to migrate from some specific version, for example, from the older Magento 1 version. So the maps, they're generated based on certain fixed code base. So they were generated based on the latest or almost latest code bases of Magento 1 and Magento 2. So that's the reason to regenerate it. If you want, and it's an important step. It greatly influences the quality of the migration. If something is not in these map files, the tool will fail to recognize this thing. It will not know what to do with it. In order to regenerate map, this is the command that you need to run from the command line. And there are a bunch of commands like this for each type of map files. So I just give you as an example this one command for class names. I want you to notice these arguments that it accepts. It's M1 and M2 directories. Pretty much it's going to look at your Magento 1, Magento 2 code base, figure out mapping, and generate these map files. All right, the second step, directory structure migration. Directory of Magento 2 have changed a little bit, actually quite a bit. So such things as PHP code, layout files, config files, theme files, static files, they used to be kind of scattered across the code base in Magento 1 and Magento 2. They're all in one directory. So that's what the tool will do for you. It will rearrange files in the file system. And that's the command to run to achieve that. One thing to notice is arguments. So you basically tell the tool where to look for the source files, the one in Magento 1 structure, and where to populate the output. Pretty obvious. More visual way for you to understand what the tool is going to do. So it's going to relocate files from those locations on the left to the file structure on the right. As I mentioned, files that belong to module used to be kind of scattered in a different location. Now they're all under the module directory. And the tool will, once you run this command, it will do exactly that. All right, a third step, layout migration. A couple of things have changed with regards to layouts in Magento 2. First thing, there used to be a big layout files that specified page structure for multiple layout handles or kind of pages of your website all in one file. In Magento 2, it's been broken down into multiple files. The reason for that, kind of more granular, it allows for more granular customizations. You can target specific page. inside, like within those XML files, format has changed a little bit too. For instance, the way you refer to blocks, types of blocks, which are PHP classes, names of these blocks, certain things have been renamed. Then references to templates, the way you specify paths to a template for one or another block, add-in resources to your page head, JavaScript, CSS, format has changed a little bit. It's still XML, but a little bit different format. Actually, it's a well-formed XML now. In order to generate layout, in order to run layout migration, you have to run this command. And you can notice that argument list is kind of a little bit different. It doesn't have this source directory like the previous command. And I noticed it causes confusion. Some people cannot figure out what it means. I figured it out. I'll tell you what it means. So what it means is a dependency on the directory structure migration. So the previous step, it relocates all the files in the destination directory already. So this step, as a next step, it already starts from the files already being in a new place. So it's going to read files from the destination directory and make changes to the same directory. It's still not your source directory. You will not, it will not touch your source files, but it will kind of proceed making changes to the destination directory. All right, and that's a more visual way to see the changes that the tool is going to do. It's going to find your layout XML file, break it down, change format of those individual files, and put them into a new location. All right, next step, configuration migration. Kind of very similar to layout migration. It's also XML, and what happened in Magento 2 also kind of similar. There used to be one big config XML file. Now it's been broken down into smaller, specialized configuration files. For now, tool covers the following types of configuration: declaration of the module, routes for your controllers, then indexers, admin menu that you can see in the admin panel, system configuration, and widgets. So obviously, there are some other types of configuration. They're not, so as of today, the tool covers only this. And I actually invite you guys to go to the GitHub, check out the tool, attempt to run it on your own code base, and look like, if a lot of your modules use certain type of configuration that is not covered, feel free to submit a pull request. I will be able to actually accept it. Me personally, I somehow happen to have permissions to press the button. Yeah, all right. And this is the command that you have to run in order to initiate configuration migration, very similar to layout, the same pattern. You can recognize the same destination directory. Will keep modifying files in the destination directory. And here is what it's going to do: break down your config XML, multiple files, including module declaration file and other files. All right, step number 5. That's the most interesting step. I even had people contact me and like, I'm not interested in configuration. Let's talk about PHP, because they know that's where the complexity is, especially given how dynamic the language is. It's challenging to migrate PHP code in general, especially when it has, doesn't have PHP doc and all these annotations. It can be challenging. And the tool does it pretty well, All right, let's see what the tool does. First of all, everywhere across your code base, it converts class names to use the namespaces, because in Magento 2, native namespaces that were introduced in PHP 5.3, I believe, they're used everywhere. So it's going to use namespaces, basically renaming all of your classes everywhere. Then there used to be some methods that create new objects where you specify type and they create it. So it will affect all these factory methods, arguments. You will see like the fully qualified class name right there in a string argument. It will fix all the static calls to methods, constants, arguments, right? Type annotations in arguments, and also PHP doc. All right, we'll also go over fixing table names. So in Magento 2, table names are just full table names rather than these aliases of table names. It will fix the format of the translation, double underscore function. It has changed a little bit, so tool will take care of it. All right, I want you to pay attention to the arguments. So the idea here is kind of the same as other two migration steps. It's still gonna proceed with migration in the destination directory. However, it also accepts two additional arguments, which is Magento 1 and Magento 2 code base. It's gonna look, so these arguments, two last arguments, they're optional. But I highly recommend you to supply these arguments. It will greatly improve the results, quality of the results, because the tool will be able to look up certain things in the source code and migrate them, as opposed to fall back to certain defaults. All right, let's look at some code. Who likes to see the code? I do. So this code that you see on the screen, I intentionally did not put the whole file. That's pretty much somewhere in a class, in an application. So it's somewhere inside some method in a class. The tool will make those changes. So all calls, static calls to Mage class, that will be gone. So it will replace all these calls with dependency injection. And what is not shown on the slide, somewhere at the top of this class, there will be a constructor. It will generate the list of dependencies. It will inject them on constructor. It will assign dependencies to the properties, even generate these properties too. So it covers a couple of things, dependency injection, then certain things like registry, and a bunch of other things. It will cover. I didn't want to make it too tiny font for you to see. And even translation, you can see that the helper is gone now. So translation is just a global double underscore function. All right, so we looked at all these 5 steps. I just wanted to give you a quick summary. I know some people will be kind of taking pictures. It will be available. The presentation will be available. But still, that's the complete list of commands that you need to run in order to kind of fully take advantage of the tool. It will do all the transformations that it can at the moment. All these 5 steps. And step number 1, it can be also multiple steps, because here I regenerate only class mappings. You may want to regenerate module name mapping and other mappings as well. But this is kind of important one. Class names. One last thing I wanted to show you is how this tool fits into the bigger picture, into the project of migrating your source code. So the way I see it, and my department, expert consulting group, sees it because of me, I would divide it into 3 steps. First step. Before starting any migration, it makes sense to clean up a little bit your Magento 1 code base. Remove unused modules. You don't want to be migrating and fixing something that you don't use. You'll be surprised, everybody has a ton of unused modules. That's surprising to me, but it's kind of common. Then modification to core files. It's kind of uncommon, and I'm not talking about official patches. It's your hacks of the core. They have to be reverted. Why? Because we'll be changing it. We'll be substituting framework and core files with Magento 2 core files. So you will either lose these changes, you will lose these changes unless you re-implement them as your customizations, proper modules, and then they will go through regular migration process. Also, kind of not very obvious, remove fixes of certain bugs that are specific to Magento 1. As other speakers noted, certain workflows in the application have changed. For example, product creation flow. Now we have the whole different UI and different steps for creating product. If you had a bug, let's say you experienced a bug, some JavaScript bug in the product creation flow, the chances are it's going to be fixed in Magento 2. Because it's different, the whole flow is different, so bug is not going to be there. You need to kind of inspect your existing fixes and see, if it's, you need to know what these fixes affect, and I would say most likely just revert all your fixes or implement them as customizations. All right, once you've done it, you can go ahead and run the tool. However, the way I recommend to do it, you first try to run the tool against your modules and take a look at the output. Just inspect what the tool did, just do a diff, like on my code slide, you'll do a diff and compare and inspect what tool covered and what it didn't cover. For some projects, if the tool didn't cover like one line of code, and this is not a common pattern to your code, you may choose to just fix it manually, right? It's just one line of code and you just fix it one time. But if you encounter a pattern that maybe is unique to your project, maybe the way you structure your modules, somehow it's not picked up by the tool and it's everywhere, like across all your files. The better approach would be to fork the tool and to implement it as part of the tool so that you can repeat this process. So I would say tailor the tool to the unique needs of your project and some specifics of your code base. If it's something generic, again, I encourage you to submit pull requests on GitHub. If you encounter, okay, something is generic, not specific to me, contribute to everybody. Otherwise, just keep it private to you. All right, then run the tool. Once you run the tool, it generates all this code for Magento 2 modules. So the way I recommend to proceed from that point, I would say just disable all these modules, commit push disabled modules, and you'll end up with kind of vanilla Magento 2. Make sure it works, they will be disabled, they will not affect it at all. So as I told you, it will require some manual work. So now is the time for this manual work. I would go module by module. As a developer locally, I enable one module. I go in a browser, verify what it does. I encounter some issues, or maybe it works, but I encounter some issues, troubleshoot and fix it, and then commit and push enabled module. And just go module by module, enabling them until the full code base is enabled. That's the approach. And meanwhile, I don't really specify it here, but Magento 2 comes with a suite of tests. I would start from the point where you can successfully run all existing Magento 2 tests, and with each module, you need to maintain all these tests green. And sometimes you may want to kind of remove tests, disable tests if you're customizing some feature and the test is irrelevant. It's failing, but it's failing because it tests something that does not exist because of your customization. Fix the test, write new tests according to your internal process, but start from green tests and maintain green tests. Skip irrelevant tests. All right, that's it from me. I again encourage everybody to go to the GitHub and contribute to the tool to make it better, to simplify the migration process for everybody. I personally do that. I submit pull requests. Thank you, guys.